Excellent.
So there we go. We are recording it. Thank you very much again, Sally, for running these sessions. The third in our Servicing Your Skis sessions, been very popular. Great to see. Thank you so much, Sally and Ski Bartlett's. Really good. Tonight's session, I believe, is going to be around waxing. Over to you, Sally.
Thank you very much, Robin. So the last session, for those of you that weren't on here, we covered base sharpening and edge sharpening. So now we're going to kind of carry on from that, and we're going to cover the basics of waxing and like scraping, finishing the ski with the brushing. So as we left off last week, we were obviously on the side edge, and I mentioned that if you've been side edging your ski, the base of the ski will have small filings left in the ski from where the edger has been running along the base. The filings have been dropping down the side of the ski, and it will get pushed into the base. So last week we talked about what you would do for cleaning the base before you started doing any edging. We're going to effectively do that same process now before we wax. So to work on anything with the base, you're going to turn the ski base up so that obviously you can see what you're doing. Tighten the centre vise at the moment, but when we come to waxing, we're actually going to loosen this vise off, and I'll explain why in a minute. But so first things first, if this ski has been edged, it's going to have remnants of filings. You might still have a bit of dirt in there. So we're going to do same process as we did before. We're going to wrap the Fibertex around a plastic scraper this time. But as I said before, you could use a back of a brush to wrap it round. Some people might have a metal true bar. And all you're going to do is just literally running that down the ski. And all it's doing is, I think you can kind of see there, you can see the dirt and remnants coming off the ski. So we'll just do a couple of passes like that. You could, if you didn't want to use Fibertex and you've already got a brass brush or a Tampico brush, then you could use that as well. So just do another pass. So that is just giving us a nice clean slate to obviously wax from. We don't want any debris on the ski. So where we've just used the Fibertex, we will potentially have still little bits left there. This is just a standard soft bristled paintbrush, really, really good for just wiping anything off the ski. And you can use this on the side edge when you're filing to get rid of any filings. So just make sure there's nothing on the ski. I mean, you can also use, I've got here just a soft cloth, same exact idea. Just make sure there isn't anything on the ski before you wax. So what we're going to do before we actually wax, one question is, well, actually, no, I'll come back to that in a minute. One other way to clean the base of the ski. So we talked before about hot scraping. This ski has actually been through a base grinder. So I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but let me see if I can show you. Let's see, can we get a close up? No, not brilliantly. Let me just see, Ollie's just going to put a light on it. Give us 1 second. No, but anyway, the base of the ski has got slight grey flecks in it. Unfortunately, it's hard to see on the camera. Those little grey flecks, you might get if the ski is dry, but where this has just been through the grinder, it's also dry and creating that grey effect on the ski. When it's like that, it means it needs waxing. One thing you can do to sort of nourish the base before we put a finishing wax on is to do what we call hot scraping. So hot scraping is brilliant if the ski's got very dirty. It's brilliant if the ski's got very dry, so that grey effect. You might also get a time when, it's been stone ground and then needs some wax nourished in the base. It's also brilliant if you've got a brand new ski and you want to sort of load the base with some warm, soft wax. If you think about it as being almost like moisturising your hands and stopping your hands chapping. The wax is doing a similar idea to the base, on the base. So what it's doing is it's protecting the base from any damage, but it's sort of nourishing it, making it obviously run fast, which is one of the objectives of waxing. So what we're going to do, I'm going to demonstrate some hot scraping on this one. We're just going to hot scrape half the ski. So all we're going to do is use a very warm wax. So for hot scraping, you want it to be, we do specific waxes called base prep waxes that are very warm waxes that get really into the base. But if it's just a high temperature wax, as in a warm weather wax, that will work in a similar way. So for those of you that have never ironed your skis before, two things to note. We've covered on the tool section, we said about waxing irons. So we said about a proper waxing iron having a thick metal base to dissipate the heat. So important thing to note. Another thing to remember when you're using an iron, if the iron starts smoking, you've got the temperature too high. Okay, so keep the temperature low enough that it melts the wax, but without like smoke. So all it needs to do is be able to freely melt the wax, and as it's running along the ski, it feel like it's freely melting the wax. But if it starts smoking, you need to turn the temperature down, wait a few minutes for it to cool down, and then obviously carry on. The reason for that is if it is smoking, you're potentially going to damage the base, but it's just too high a temperature for that particular wax. So with the warmer waxes, it's a lower temperature. If you're waxing a much harder wax, you will need to raise the temperature. So all we're going to do is we're going to hold the wax against the base of the iron, and we're going to drip it down the ski. What I normally do is I do effectively like a wiggly worm, a snake down the ski, and I just literally drip it down the ski, and then we're going to iron it on. So I'm just going to demonstrate that for you. She says, I'm just going to turn my temperature up a little. Okay. So you drip it off the corner of the iron, because you can then direct what you're doing much more so. If you hold it this way, it's going to kind of drip everywhere. If you hold it so that the diagonal of the iron is dripping down, you can maneuver what you're doing and direct the drips, you know, onto the ski much better. So you're just trying to get like a fairly even spread of drips across the ski. I think Ollie's going to do a close-up for us there. Hey, there we go. So if you guys can see that. So just literally dripped down the ski, and then all we're going to do is iron that in. So we're just trying to make it smooth. If it feels like, so I'm going to do an example here. If it feels like, if you can see there, Ollie, it's not covered enough of the base and you've got some patches, don't just keep ironing over it, just drip a little bit more wax on. So you've got a little bit more coverage, and then iron it. So the idea is you only need enough wax to have effectively a thin layer between the iron and the ski. You don't need excessive amounts, but at the same time, if you haven't got enough wax, what you'll find is as you run the iron along, it'll actually kind of stick, and it'll go like this as it's going along the base of the ski, because it's not got enough wax, and you're almost on the base as opposed to a layer of wax, an even coating across the ski. And so what we're doing with hot scraping, the difference is we're gonna, so I'm not going all the way to the end because I'm just going to do half the ski, but normally you would obviously go all the way to the end. I'm going to cheat for tonight. The idea of hot scraping is we're actually going to scrape the wax while it's still hot. So we're going to scrape it straight away. What this is doing is it's pulling, it's going to scrape very easily, but it's actually pulling any dirt out of the ski, but it's not doing it in a way that's damaging the ski. So it's not it's not doing it in a way that's going to dry the ski out, which is what would happen with a base cleaner. So you're literally scraping again. So I know we covered scraping a little bit before, but just a couple of things to note. We said before, use a thick scraper. So this is what they call a 5mm scraper. If it's thicker, it doesn't bend. So if I push on there, it only bends a slight amount. That means the base of the ski is going to stay flat. The base of the ski isn't going to bend as you're scraping the ski. The other thing to note is that, in fact, I'll come back here, your thumbs are going to just sit in the middle of the scraper and you're facing it away from you. So you're facing it that way, away from you, and you're pushing. If you turn, I don't know, I'm just thinking, if you turn the scraper this way and push it, what will happen is you'll dig it into the ski and you'll actually put almost grooves in the ski. If you do it this way and push it away from you, it will scrape the surfaces, the layers of wax off the ski bit by bit, but it won't dig into the wax. So I'm just going to do that once more. So all we're doing is just trying to get any remnants of this wax off. You'll find it will stick to the scraper like this, and it will stick to the scraper more so when you're hot scraping than it would do normally. Just keep that clean. Just use your fingernail, just push that off, because it will get really clogged up. Because you're hot scraping, the wax is still semi sort of molten, and you'll find it will clog up the scraper. So just keep scraping it off. So the advantage of doing this as well, it takes seconds to do, but what it's also done is it's nourished the base, it's cleaned the base, but it's actually sort of pre-warmed the base. So if I touch that now, there's a warmth to the base. So what we're going to do now is we're going to put our finishing wax on, and that will go in much better because the ski is already kind of pre-warmed. With wax, well, in fact, with, yes, we'll talk about the waxing now. So with waxing, we covered this a little bit in the first session. Waxes are, you will need to have different waxes for different dry slope, indoor snow, outdoor snow. Generally speaking, for dry slope and indoor snow, dry slope will be a very, very hard wax. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to protect the ski. So the idea of having a very, very hard wax is the hard wax stops the heat and friction buildup. So as a ski runs over the plastic bristles on dry slope, you get a lot of friction from the bristles. That creates a lot of heat. The harder the wax is, the more protection you've got on your base. So for dry slope, the main thing is super, super hard wax. Literally, if you've got wax at home, try and push your fingernail, use your fingernail and literally just push it into the wax. If you can't push your fingernail in, that's the sort of thing you want. If you can push your fingernail in, and like this one, can you see I've made like a big mark there, just with my fingernail? So that will be too soft to use for dry slope. So the harder the better, and you'll get much better protection of the base from any of the heat build up on the dry slope, but they will then run better as well. With the dry slope wax, you wax it on exactly the same way as we just did, but you're just going to leave it to go cold. So you're not going to do absolutely anything to it other than waxing it on, leave it to go cold, and then you can brush it, and we'll cover that in a second. And then the other thing you can do is you can use one of these little Zardoz base boosts. Effectively, it helps stop the friction build up because it stops heat build up on the ski, and you just literally unscrew it and wipe that down the ski. So dry slope is kind of very, very easy because the main objective is try and protect the base of your ski by using the hardest waxes you can. Leave it on, don't scrape it, have it as a very thick layer that's going to protect the ski. For snow, it's going to be a little bit different. So what we're going to do now is we will Oliver has got for me another ski ready waxed. Thank you, thank you. Okay, so we've got one here that we've waxed earlier. So for snow, you've got a number of options. If I know on here we've got a number of people who experience races, we've got people that race snow dome, we've got people that race obviously away on snow, but we've also got some recreational skiers, you know, more holiday skiers on here. So I would say you can either go down the route of a much more universal type wax for snow that covers a big temperature band, a big wide sort of +7 to -10, 12, something like that, and will cover the majority of your skiing. And the temperature bands, you need to look on waxes. Some waxes, the temperature the temperature bands are air temperature. Some of them are snow temperature. Obviously look at the air temperature, because snow temperature you're not going to know unless you've got an infrared temperature gauge to fire at the snow and know the snow temperature. So look at the air temperature, and what you can do is just literally look at what the weather's going to be like the next day. Look at the weather forecast. The weather says it's going to be -5. You then just choose a wax that covers that -5 temperature. So it's you can, with waxes, you can go as much as you want in the kind of technical realm, or you can kind of keep it super kind of simple and more universal. So the universal ones will still run fairly fast, but they're not going to be anywhere near as good as if you have one of the narrower band temperature waxes. For indoor snow dome, you can choose a wax around about -4, generally works pretty well. But, you know, the best thing is experiment, try what works. Some snow domes will be, you know, colder than others. But so the waxing element is exactly the same whether we're hot scraping or whether we're using our finishing wax. So if we were going to wax this ski again, we would do exactly the same process, dripping it on the ski, and we'd iron it in. What we've done now is we've actually pre-waxed this ski because we wanted it to cool down. So this is now cool to touch, which means I can scrape it properly and I can brush it properly and show you the finishing of a ski with the different brushes. So what we're going to do, we're going to scrape this one now. So this is fully waxed with a proper snow wax. So again, remember, thumbs in the middle of the scraper and facing the scraper away from you. You're using one edge to effectively, you're trying to just take layers of the wax off rather than gouging the whole lot off at once. So we're just gonna, like we did when we were sharpening, fall over. You're just gonna do a couple of passes, short, you know, overlap, exactly like we did when we were edging. If you try and do any work running all the way down the length of the ski, it's hard work and you're likely to trip over things. And, you know, it's sort of almost, I guess, a waste of what you're doing, and often can be that you can slip off, that kind of thing. So I would say, you know, same as edging, split the ski into thirds, a few passes at one end, and then overlap. So we're trying to take
now on
everything
the Zoom
off. So we don't want anything left on the ski. So I don't know if you notice now. I don't know if you notice now two things. Firstly, I've done the cardinal sin of not putting my gloves on. So I'm going to do that before I slip off and take my knuckles off. And then I'm also going to show you something that's going to make your scraping a lot easier. So this is what they call a scraper sharpener. So these are made by Toko. There's a couple of different versions of them. They have just in here little ceramic blades, and it's different thicknesses, different grooves. What it does is it actually sharpens the scraper. So as I'm going down there now, it's not feeling like the scraper is biting as much as it should do. So what we can do is literally find the right size notch, and all you do is run the scraper through this ceramic blades. And best thing, if you've got one of these, run the scraper a few times in one direction, turn it around, and a few times in the other direction. So try and make sure you go right off the end of the scraper. Don't stop part way, otherwise the scraper will not stay flat and you'll end up with a curve in the scraper. But the difference you'll notice now, let me just, so if I scrape the ski now, hopefully, fingers crossed, this should make a massive difference to how easy that scrapes off compared to what it was a second ago. So we're going to do one more pass. So the other thing to note is you've got wax on the base here. So we've scraped all of that off. The other thing is, as you've ironed the wax, you'll get wax dripping down the metal edge down here. So in the corner of scrapers, you see there's a tiny little notch just there. That's used for scraping the wax off the metal edge. So all you're going to do is hold it on the metal edge, and you're just going to run it along the metal edge, and that's just taking any wax off of that side. And same on the other side. This part that I'm doing here of scraping the edge, you can do while the ski is hot. So if you've just waxed the ski, you can run that down the side edge, but and you can do that for the dry slope wax as well, but just leave the base wax to cool down before you scrape it. We're going to go on in a second to brushing and finishing the ski. But before we go on to that, has anybody got any questions on, obviously we cleaned the base and then hot scraped and did our finishing wax. Has anybody got any questions?
Sally, your timing is perfect. Thank you very much. And what I'll do, we've got questions that have come up in the chat box here. I'll pose the questions, and if people need to come in with any stuff over and above that, then do so, or we'll get a quick chance for some more questions at the end. So I'm not necessarily taking these in order, folks. First of all, it's a question from Peter, who's been involved in the sessions in Hemel. He wants to know if you're doing these same sessions with Hemel, the same structure. I think he wants to sign off and come back in again.
Yes, no, we are. So he can gem up now and then recap again all what he's forgotten in the Hemel sessions over the next couple of weeks. And obviously there'll be variations upon a theme, and everyone will ask different questions. So I'm sure there'll be value to be had from all of them. Perfect.
What are the differences between a plastic and metal scrapers? This is from Joe.
Okay, so one's made of plastic, one's made of metal. No, joking aside, generally speaking, use a plastic scraper, don't use a metal scraper if it's for scraping wax. If you use a metal scraper, they're too aggressive and they'll actually almost take layers of the actual base material off. So the place for using a metal scraper is when you're doing any repair work. So we touched on this when we talked about all the tools on the first session. If you're P-texing a ski, a metal scraper is really good both for dripping the P-tex on and dripping it in a gouge. You can hold the P-tex over the metal scraper, move it along the ski, drip it along another section. And then that metal scraper is then really good for just taking very, very thin layers of the P-tex repair material off. But if you use it just for scraping the wax, it will start to actually take layers of the base as well, because they're just too sharp, too aggressive. Plastic scrapers, yes, they're sharp, but they cut in a kinder way to the base.
A question here from Richard, trying to make us all jealous. He's thinking of using his garage in Teen as a workshop. It's below ground, so through the winter it's usually around +5 degrees. It's colder than out here, that's for certain, in Cardiff. What is the temperature of the workshop important?
Good question. Yes and no. In an ideal world, if it's a warmer temperature, the wax is generally going to go on a little bit easier. A lot of people end up having to wax outside on balconies when they're abroad on holiday, or racers, away doing camps, all sorts of things like that. If it's warmer, great. If it's not, if you do the hot scraping, that will warm the base. That then when you do any of the finishing waxes, because the base will already be warm, that wax will go in better. So it shouldn't be a detrimental effect to how the wax will actually adhere to the ski. But I would suggest doing the hot scraping first.
And the correct answer to that one, Richard, should have been, if we're invited out there, we can check for you. But got another question here about storing skis. Is there a wax you'd recommend for storing skis?
Yes. So the wax we used, where we said about the very, very soft wax, hot, like warm temperature wax for doing the hot scraping, that's probably one of the best waxes as well to use for storing the skis. So if you were going to put them away for the summer, you're not going to use them, they're your snow skis, what have you, just wax as though you're waxing normally, put maybe a slightly thicker coating on. You can also just actually run the wax down the metal edges to make sure that it's fully covered the metal edge, and then just leave it thick. That's going to do two things. It's going to protect the base from drying out just from the air, but it's also gonna stop the edges from going rusty. The amount of skis we get brought in here where the base looks as hairy and grey as anything, and the edges are literally thick with rust. So yeah, on that note, a couple of things to think about is, if you're coming back off holiday, make sure your skis are dried off fully. Either in resort you might dry them off quickly, but say you've skied for the day, you've had to throw them in a ski bag, you've jumped on a transfer bus, that kind of thing. When you get home, make sure they are fully dried, and then use a warm temperature wax, just left thick, and that should be fine. That's also a good thing for racers to get into the routine of, for what they call travel waxing, but same exact thing. If you were using it for more travel waxing and you're going to be then skiing on them in resort, use maybe a mid-temperature wax. That way you can scrape that off. Generally, the mid-temperature wax might be fine for skiing on that next day. And if not, you can either wax with a slightly colder or warmer temperature wax to, train or race the next day.
Okay, I've got two more questions before you get going again. The scraper, is it just a generic plastic scraper that you're using? Available?
Yeah, I mean,
retail outlets.
Yeah, no, I mean, they are a ski scraper, but it's basically a Perspex rectangular piece of plastic. So for all intents and purposes, it's generic. Yeah, as I say, just try and use a slightly thicker one because it just stops it bending. But other than that, it doesn't need to be anything super special.
Okay, one last question. Any tips for waxing rockered bases quickly? Because the flat.
Yeah, it shouldn't be absolutely any different. Still, obviously, if you imagine a rockered ski is going to be curved down a lot more at the tip, and effectively a load of that. If the ski was just flat, if you imagine it's turned that way, say in an exaggerated way, it's like that, and this front part isn't touching the snow when it's on piste, but as soon as you go off piste, that is going to be touching the snow. So wax it exactly like you would do normally, no difference at all. Still completely, waxing tip to tail, no difference otherwise. And actually, just on that front, I didn't actually say about whether you need to wax tip to tail, tail to tip. Generally, with the iron, you can work it backwards and forwards, but I always try and finish just with one even pass down the ski, or a couple of even passes. Just try and get that wax smooth, and working just those end passes from all the way tip to tail.
Okay, I have got one more question before you get going again, which has come from Chris from the Armed Forces Para Ski team. I know they're out in Austria at the moment. What about the centre clamp when ironing the ski? Should it be released to allow the ski to flex with the heat?
Yes, it should, and that was what I said about at the beginning, and then I did neglect to do as we were in mid-flow. So yeah, effectively, when you're ironing, just loosen that off. When you're ironing, you don't need this clamped because you're not actually putting any force, onto the ski. Let that off. What will happen when you're doing the finishing waxes and the ski's a lot hotter? This center part of the ski will actually lift up, and instead of the ski being shaped, well, I say like that, it'll actually almost flatten out. If you keep that clamped and the ski gets very hot, the ski will want to force up and it can't because it's clamped in, and you can actually sort of damage the bend of the ski. Sometimes the glues can separate, that kind of thing. So just generally loosen the center off. Obviously, then when you're scraping, you need to tighten that up because otherwise this is going to happen. So just when you're scraping, tighten that back up again. But yes, anytime you're ironing, loosen it off.
There we go. Done with questions. Back to you.
Excellent. So we'll move on to brushing. Brushes, there is a multitude of different ones. There is brass, horsehair, Tampico, there's nylon, there's soft nylon, hard nylon, soft hair, horsehair, hard horsehair. But keep it obviously straightforward to begin with. If you're only going to use one brush, I'd say use a horsehair brush, but I would recommend a nylon and a horsehair as your sort of two starter brushes. The reason being, a nylon brush will smooth the wax. What the horsehair brush does is the horsehair brush is much more of like a polishing, finishing brush. So whenever you're using any brushes, I guess the cardinal rule that I always have is always finish with a horsehair brush. Horsehair brushes are anti-static. So it stops dirt being attracted to the ski, but it has a real polishing effect. So you'll get like a real nice sheen on the ski, but it doesn't necessarily smooth the wax, and it won't necessarily take any more out of the top of the ski. So the objective with snow is we don't actually want any wax on top of the ski. We only want the wax to be in the base. So if we use a nylon brush, it will just take off any excess wax, and then we can finish with the horsehair. So what I'm going to do now, as we said when we did the tools, we've got rectangular type brushes. We've got oval brushes with the handle in the back like that. In all obviously, all the varieties are available in every brush. And then we've got our all singing, all dancing horsehair brush. So what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to use a hand brush to begin with, and then we're actually going to finish with the roto brush with the horsehair brush, and I'll kind of show you the use. With any of the hand brushes and brushes generally, always work from tip to tail, so that you're working with, if you imagine the ski base has got like fibers in it, we want those fibers to be running in the direction of travel. So if we scrape, if we brush from tip to tail, that stops any damage to the base and allows it to run much better. So we are going to hold, I'm going to just show you down here, we're going to hold the brush across the ski, and we're just going to hold it with both hands, and we don't want to hold it like out here that you've got no pressure on the ski. But I don't know if you can see now. Let me grab, yeah, here you go. Ollie's going to give us an assistance. If you see, I don't want the bristles to be bent over like that. If I do that, what's happening is the tips of the bristles aren't actually doing anything. So you're almost just like gently brushing over the ski, but you're not actually doing anything. If you keep the bristles upright, apply firm enough pressure that those bristles have got contact with the base, but not enough that it's bending it over. So you're just gonna gently but firmly push along the ski. And so here we go, we'll do a little section here and you'll see the difference. So if you look there, you can see the difference in this section here that's been brushed, hopefully, and then this section, which is then obviously still just from scraping. So I'm going to run down the rest of the ski with this nylon brush. So all we're trying to do is we're going to brush the ski enough that it's like how much is enough. So I would say brush it till you can't feel that there's any sort of resistance anywhere when you're brushing. So it feels like it's freely moving all the way down the ski. Also look down the ski. Unfortunately, because the camera's not brilliant, we can't visually see very clearly, but you'll get slightly shiny patches. I don't know if you can see now. Can you see? I don't know if you can see some shiny areas and some sort of more matte areas. Sometimes the shiny areas might be that actually you need to scrape the ski a little bit more, or it might be that you just need to brush it. So as you're brushing down the ski, if you get an area where there's some resistance and it doesn't want to move, it doesn't want to brush, it sort of feels like there's some friction there, have a little look. It might be that we need to scrape a little bit more and we've left a little bit on the ski, or it might just be that we need to brush it a little bit more. So you're trying to brush it enough that we haven't got that feeling of friction. And you can do exactly the same as we did before, those kind of overlapping strokes, and then always finish with the longer passes. So it's the same with kind of any of the tools you're using. And you will get some wax build up. So sometimes, you know, just literally bang it against your hand because you'll get lots of little bits of wax and it will just clog up the brush. But main thing is don't press too hard. That's all I, you know, kind of main thing to think about is that the bristles need to be upright for them to actually do anything. Otherwise you're just kind of stroking down the ski. So what we're going to do now, that's all brushed, it's looking nice and shiny. We're now going to use the roto brush to get a really like nice polished finish. For any of you who either have got roto brushes or want to use a roto brush, so I'll just show you there. So we've got the roto brush in here. This handle is quick release handle, so the brushes can come off and you can swap to different brushes nice and easily. Just clicks on. This can spin independently to me switching the drill on, and it is just a standard cordless drill. So a couple of things to note if you're using a roto brush. Don't, whatever you do, hold it in one position for too long. It will do the same thing as if you held an iron on the base for too long, which we didn't actually touch on. But if you do hold either the iron on the base for too long or the roto brush in one place for too long, you will blister the base, and it will literally be like a blister. It will cause damage to the ski. So just keep it moving. Again, same as with the hand brush, don't push too hard. Let just the weight of the drill and the brush do all the work for you, and you are literally just going to walk down the ski. So start off with it moving, and then you're just going to put it onto the ski and walk along. Actually, Ollie, can I get you? I'm just going to get Ollie here to show half the ski that's been done and half that hasn't. Okay, so we are just going to brush this off. So hopefully, depending on how the camera is behaving there, you should be able to see the difference between one half of the ski and the other half of the ski. And if you can't, I apologise that the camera doesn't pick it up. So yeah, the advantage with the roto brushes is you get a much better finish, and it's almost like if you imagine you were using a hand brush and you're brushing, say, 20 times down the ski, 1 or 2 passes on the rotor brush is going to be the equivalent of multiple passes on the hand brushes. The what was I going to say? My brain has gone. Listen to, if you're using hand brushes, it's not so easy with the rotor brushes. If you're using a hand brush, listen to the sound of the brush as you're brushing. If you're brushing along, initially it will sound quite noisy. The more you brush, the quieter it will get. And that means, you know, you've taken all the wax off and you've created that smoother finish. With the roto brush, yeah, as Ollie's saying, we actually had it rotating the wrong way. So do make sure that it's rotating. If you look there, it's rotating and kicking the wax effectively away from you, if you imagine that. So it's rotating this way. The other thing to note with the roto brushes is if you use a roto brush that's got the brass bristles, so the bristles like this in it, if it's got those brass bristles, make sure with the roto brush that you're wearing glasses. The brass bristles have a habit of flicking out, and obviously being metal, it would be like literally getting a metal splinter in your eye. So make sure you wear glasses. I mean, a lot of people with rotor brushes will wear glasses anyway, but definitely with the brass brush, make sure you're wearing glasses. Otherwise, most of the other brushes should be fine. So to be honest, that's going to be the majority of what you're going to need to do. So first things first, just kind of recapping through, is clean the ski after you've been edge sharpening. So clean it first with Fibertex or a brush. Hot scrape ideally to clean the base, and if you're not hot scraping and you're happy that it's clean, you know, you can start waxing straight away. But the hot scraping is really good to do periodically and really good to do if the base looks grey, because anytime you see a grey base, it's a dry base and it desperately needs waxing. And then you're going to go on to your finishing waxes. That will be either the harder waxes for dry slope or the temperature appropriate waxes for snow, and then obviously thinking a nylon brush to clean any of the excess out of the ski, and then a horsehair brush to finish and polish the ski. Another thing to also know is that when you've done all this lovely work on your ski, don't just slap them together and put them.
You've whereabouts?
Oh,
Okay. What doing?
Yeah, don't just put the skis together and leave. Where's my if when you've finished, you've done all this lovely work, you've prepared these skis amazingly, don't just put them together and stick them in a rack, stick them in your car, what have you. Use ski ties to protect that base work that you've done. So the ski ties, the best ones to use are ones with a foam pad in the middle like that. So what this does is you just slide the foam pad into the middle of the skis and turn it around that way. Slide the foam pad into the middle of the skis, and then you're going to wrap that round the ski. What it's doing, if you can kind of see there, is that foam, it's going to, because it's sandwiched in the ski, it's stopping that bit of the ski rubbing together. You'll notice sometimes it looks like you've got wiggly worms on the base of your ski here. What that will be is because you haven't used a ski tie, or because you've put a ski tie on, but there's been some dirt maybe on the ski, and that dirt has kind of rubbed backwards and forwards and scratched up the base of the ski. But generally, if you can do a ski tie top and bottom of the ski, which is where the two contact points are, and if it's, you know, a race ski or you want to, you know, look after the skis, you can put a third one in the centre of the ski. I know I've got the brake tones on here, but in the centre of the ski here, just to stop any movement of that ski backwards and forwards. So we got, yeah, Ollie's actually got one here that we can show you that's been, if you can you see all those little scratches are basically where the skis have been put together with a little bit of potentially grit or something out of the snow, and then they've just rubbed together and caused all those little like little lines down the ski. And there you can get those out. You can use the Fibertex will generally clean a lot of that out and smooth the ski again. So I think that is pretty well most things covered. Is there any more questions?
Yeah, certainly, Sally. Questions just come in again from Chris. What are your thoughts on racers using cork, roto brush? Yeah, all this will be covered in another presentation.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I would imagine, but clarify or let me know if this is right or not, whether you're meaning with the dry slope hard waxes, because a lot of people are definitely doing that. What they're doing is waxing with the really hard waxes and then using a cork roto brush to create a very polished finish. That polished finish almost seems to be slightly harder and obviously runs better, and does seem to be working very well for dry slope. If it's for snow, probably it's going to be more beneficial for some of the higher fluorinated waxes, but not so. I would use more the brushes for, you know, general waxing.
Fabulous. So that does it. Oh, bless you. No more questions for this one. Now, our plans for next week was to cover the use of Discman or other alternatives may be available, and use of ceramic as well. So we'll be putting up some stuff around that. This is recorded. We'll put out a link about where it is. It's on the Snowsport Wales YouTube channel. Sally, thanks again so much. I've been waxing skis for a million years and I've been learning things on every one of these sessions. You do a great job. So thank you again. And, you know, if anybody's got any other suggestions for future topics as well, then let us know. We'll have to have, Sally will have to have a day off eventually. But yeah, again, thank you, Sally.
No, thank you guys. Thank you all for coming as well. It's very much appreciated, and hopefully you're all learning something.